Most people think they understand pain. They think pain looks like tears, silence, isolation, or anger. They think the wounded person becomes smaller, weaker, easier to predict, easier to control. But they misunderstand one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. They misunderstand what happens when a deeply empathetic woman is pushed beyond her limit, because the moment that changes everything is not when she cries. It is not when she begs. It is not when she explains herself for the 100th time to people who have already decided not to listen. The moment that changes everything is when she finally sees the truth. For a long time, she gave people the benefit of the doubt. She searched for reasons behind their actions. She explained away disrespect. She justified broken promises. She convinced herself that if she just loved harder, understood deeper, sacrificed more, things would eventually become different. That is what empaths do. They search for the wounded child behind the cruel adult. They search for meaning behind chaos. They search for light where everyone else sees darkness. But every human being has a limit. And when that limit is reached, something extraordinary happens. The hurt female empath stops trying to convince people of her value. Let that sink in. She stops explaining. She stops defending. She stops chasing. She stops negotiating for the basic respect that should have been there from the beginning. The people around her often miss the significance of this moment because it arrives quietly. There is no dramatic announcement, no warning siren, no public declaration. There is only a subtle shift in energy, a change in focus, a decision made in complete silence. And silence is dangerous when it comes from someone who has spent years speaking from the heart, because once she reaches that point, she begins to reclaim every ounce of energy she gave away. The attention she invested in fixing others becomes attention invested in herself. The compassion she poured into people who never appreciated it becomes compassion directed toward her own healing. The time she spent proving her loyalty becomes time spent building her future. And suddenly, the same people who ignored her begin to notice something strange. She is no longer available in the ways they expected. She is no longer responding from old wounds. She is no longer reacting to manipulation. She is no longer participating in games she never wanted to play. And that is when confusion begins. People become shocked when access disappears. People become shocked when emotional labor is no longer free. People become shocked when the person they underestimated starts walking a different path. But the biggest surprise is still ahead, because healing changes perception. A hurt empath sees the world through pain. A healed empath sees the world through clarity. And clarity is powerful. Clarity allows her to recognize patterns she once ignored. Clarity allows her to identify manipulation before it takes root. Clarity allows her to distinguish between genuine connection and convenient attention. Clarity allows her to stop confusing potential with reality. For years, she may have focused on who people could become. Now she pays attention to who they actually are. That single shift transforms everything. The people who expected endless patience encounter boundaries. The people who expected endless forgiveness encounter standards. The people who expected endless access encounter distance. And many of them cannot understand what happened. They assume someone changed her. They assume someone influenced her. They assume someone taught her to become cold. But they are wrong. She did not become cold. She became aware. There is a difference. Coldness is the absence of feeling. Awareness is the presence of wisdom. She still cares deeply. She still feels deeply. She still understands people in ways that most never will. The difference is that she no longer uses empathy as a reason to abandon herself. That lesson cost her too much to learn. Now, watch what happens next. The same sensitivity that once caused suffering becomes a source of strength. The same intuition she ignored becomes a guide. The same emotional depth that others mocked becomes a competitive advantage in every area of life. Relationships improve because she chooses better people. Opportunities increase because she trusts herself more. Confidence grows because it is no longer dependent on external validation. And perhaps most shocking of all, she discovers that peace is more valuable than approval. She stops trying to be understood by everyone. She stops trying to be liked by everyone. She stops trying to rescue everyone. Instead, she becomes selective, intentional, focused, and powerful. Not powerful because she dominates others. Powerful because she finally belongs to herself. That is the transformation nobody expects. People expect revenge. They expect drama. They expect emotional explosions. But what often happens is far more significant. She becomes unavailable to the patterns that once controlled her. She becomes unavailable to the chaos that once consumed her. She becomes unavailable to the people who only valued her when she was exhausted. And then something remarkable occurs. The life she was meant to build finally has room to emerge. Her voice becomes stronger. Her standards become higher. Her purpose becomes clearer. Her presence becomes undeniable. Not because she is trying to prove anything, not because she is seeking recognition, but because authentic strength has a different energy. It does not beg to be seen. It simply exists. So if you ever witness a hurt female empath become silent, become focused, become disciplined, and become deeply committed to her own growth, do not mistake that transformation for weakness. You may be witnessing one of the most powerful psychological shifts a human being can experience. The moment when pain stops being a prison and becomes fuel. The moment when disappointment becomes wisdom. The moment when sacrifice becomes self-respect. The moment when survival becomes transformation. And when that transformation is complete, the person standing before the world is no longer the same woman who once tolerated what she should never have accepted. She is stronger. She is clearer. She is wiser. And the people who underestimated her are left wondering how someone they thought they understood became someone they can no longer predict. That is what happens next. And that is what shocks everyone. What most people never realize is that the transformation does not happen overnight. There is no magical morning when she wakes up completely healed. There is no single conversation that erases years of disappointment. There is no sudden breakthrough that removes every scar. The transformation is built in private. It is built during the nights when nobody is watching. It is built during the moments when she chooses discipline over emotion. It is built when she resists the urge to return to what hurt her simply because it feels familiar. And that is the part that nobody applauds. The world celebrates outcomes. It rarely celebrates the internal battles that create them. Nobody sees the moment she decides not to send the message. Nobody sees the moment she chooses self-respect over temporary comfort. Nobody sees the moment she finally accepts that some people will never become who she hoped they would be. But those moments matter. Those moments change everything, because every time she chooses herself, a new identity begins to form, a stronger identity, an identity that is no longer built on being needed, an identity that is no longer built on fixing broken people, an identity that is no longer dependent upon external approval. And as this new version of herself develops, something unexpected begins to happen. The people around her start reacting differently. Some become inspired. Some become uncomfortable. Some become angry. That surprises many empaths. After all, they assume personal growth will be universally celebrated. But growth has a strange effect on relationships. It reveals them. When someone benefits from your lack of boundaries, your boundaries feel like rejection. When someone benefits from your self-doubt, your confidence feels threatening. When someone benefits from your constant availability, your independence feels offensive. The truth becomes impossible to hide. Not everyone wanted the best for her. Some simply wanted access to her. There is a difference, a very important difference, because genuine supporters celebrate your evolution. Users resist it. Supporters encourage your growth. Users fear it. Supporters respect your boundaries. Users challenge them. And eventually she learns one of life's most valuable lessons. People reveal their intentions when they stop getting what they want. That lesson changes how she sees everything. She begins paying less attention to words and more attention to patterns, less attention to promises and more attention to actions. Less attention to explanations and more attention to results. And suddenly, the world becomes easier to understand because behavior rarely lies. People may disguise motives. They may disguise emotions. They may disguise intentions, but patterns eventually expose them. The empath who once ignored red flags now recognizes them immediately. The empath who once tolerated inconsistency now questions it. The empath who once accepted excuses now expects accountability. And this is where her confidence starts becoming visible. Not loud confidence, not arrogant confidence, not performative confidence, real confidence. The kind that does not need validation, the kind that remains steady whether people approve or disapprove, the kind that survives criticism, the kind that survives rejection, the kind that survives misunderstanding. Because she finally understands something powerful. Other people's opinions are not a reliable measure of her worth. Think about that. How many years do people spend allowing strangers, critics, doubters, and temporary figures to determine how they feel about themselves? How many dreams disappear because someone else's fear becomes more influential than personal conviction? How many opportunities vanish because approval becomes more important than purpose? She refuses to live that way anymore, not because she thinks she is perfect, but because she finally recognizes that perfection was never the goal. Growth was, wisdom was, freedom was, and freedom arrives when she stops carrying responsibilities that never belonged to her. For years, she carried other people's emotions, other people's expectations, other people's mistakes, other people's unresolved issues. She tried to save people from consequences they created. She tried to rescue people from lessons they needed to learn themselves. She tried to protect people from discomfort. But eventually, she discovers a truth that changes her life. You cannot heal someone who is committed to remaining wounded. You cannot save someone who refuses responsibility. You cannot build a future with someone who is constantly destroying the present. The moment she accepts this reality, an enormous weight disappears. For the first time in a very long time, she can breathe. For the first time in a very long time, she is no longer fighting battles that do not belong to her. For the first time in a very long time, her energy becomes available for her own mission, and that mission begins expanding. Her focus sharpens, her goals become clearer, her standards become stronger, her life becomes more intentional. The same people who once overlooked her begin noticing the difference, not because she is demanding attention, but because genuine transformation is difficult to ignore. Her conversations change, her priorities change, her habits change, her environment changes, even her presence changes. There is something different about people who have survived disappointment and turned it into wisdom. They move differently, they think differently, they carry themselves differently. They understand the value of peace because they have experienced chaos. They understand the value of loyalty because they have experienced betrayal. They understand the value of honesty because they have experienced deception. And those lessons create depth, Darf, that cannot be purchased, Darf that cannot be taught in a classroom, Darf that can only be earned. That is why the hurt female empath becomes so powerful after healing. She possesses emotional intelligence forged through experience. She possesses intuition strengthened through hardship. She possesses resilience developed through adversity. And perhaps most importantly, she possesses self-awareness. She knows who she is. She knows what she values. She knows what she will tolerate. And she knows what she will never tolerate again. That certainty becomes her foundation. No longer does she chase people who are determined to leave. No longer does she beg for understanding from those committed to misunderstanding her. No longer does she sacrifice her well-being to maintain unhealthy connections. Those chapters are closed, not because she hates anyone, not because she seeks revenge, but because she finally understands that protecting her peace is not selfish, it is necessary. The strongest version of herself was never hiding in a future relationship. It was never hiding in another person's approval. It was never hiding in the next opportunity to prove her worth. The strongest version of herself was waiting on the other side of self-respect. And once she arrives there, everything begins to change. The world notices. The people who doubted her notice. The people who left notice. The people who underestimated her notice. But by then, something remarkable has happened. Their opinions matter far less than they once did because she is no longer living for their approval. She is living according to her purpose. And purpose is a force that cannot be easily distracted. Purpose creates momentum. Purpose creates resilience. Purpose creates focus. Purpose transforms pain into progress. So while others are still trying to understand what happened to her, she is already moving forward, building, learning, growing, creating, becoming. And every step she takes confirms a truth she once struggled to believe. The greatest revenge is not making others suffer. The greatest victory is becoming someone that suffering could not destroy. That is when the real shock begins. Because the woman they expected to break became the woman they can no longer stop, and yet the most fascinating part of her transformation is not what she gains, it is what she leaves behind. Because every new level of strength requires a release. Every new chapter demands a farewell. Every meaningful transformation begins with the courage to let go. That is where many people struggle. They want a different life while holding tightly to the habits, relationships, fears, and beliefs that created the old one. They want change without sacrifice, growth without discomfort, results without responsibility. But life does not work that way. The hurt female empath learns this lesson through experience. She learns that some doors cannot open until others are closed. She learns that some opportunities cannot arrive until certain distractions leave. She learns that some versions of herself must be released so stronger versions can emerge. At first, this feels uncomfortable, even painful. Because familiarity has a strange power over the human mind, people often remain attached to what hurts them simply because it is known. The unknown feels risky. The familiar feels safe, even when the familiar is causing damage. That is why so many people stay trapped, not because they lack potential, not because they lack intelligence, but because uncertainty feels more frightening than dissatisfaction. The empath understands this struggle better than most. She knows what it feels like to hold on too long, to hope too long, to wait too long, to believe that one more chance will somehow create a different outcome. But eventually reality becomes impossible to ignore.